Good day, Miss NURQAMARINA and dear viewers. Hello everyone, welcome to our group Principle of Economic Presentation video. In this presentation, we are going to brief about the macroeconomics analysis of the Singapore. Without wasting time, we moving into the group member introduction. Well, let me introduce my group members here. We all from section MC-024 and the group 9. First and foremost, I would like to introduce myself here. Hello everyone, it's me, Thineswari, daughter of Gunalan here. Here are my other group members, NURQAMARINA and TANUJA ROSHNI. We are going to take over this all presentation. Without wasting time, we moving into the content of this presentation. Well, in this content of this presentation, we are going to brief about introduction, economic function of the government, fossil monetary policies, limitation of the government policies, implementation of the economics, and conclusion of this all presentation. Without wasting time, we moving into the content of the introduction. Well, in this introduction slide, I'm going to brief about the macroeconomics of Analyze Singapore is focusing on the role of government and the government policies. Singapore is highly developed country, right? And also globally competitive economic disappear. It's a small size and the limited natural resources. The government play a crucial role in shaping the country economic success through the effective policies and the strategical planning. This topic is important because it helps us to understand how the government intervention lead through the economic functions, fossil policies, and monetary policies. It's influence the economics, decision, stability, and the growth. In this presentation, we will firstly explain the key of economic function of the government. Following that, by an analysis of fossil and monetary policies. And finally, we evaluate their impact on the economic and the choice of the outcomes. Without wasting time, we're moving into the following section. Well, in this slide, I'm going to brief about the economic functions of the government. Here I attached the three different points, which is resource allocation, income redistribution, and economic stabilization. Talk about the first point is referred to the government, how we use limited resources to produce good and the service. The Singapore government play an active role by investing in a key area such as education and technology. It ensures the resources are used effective and direct through the important sections support the growth of the economics. A result is business became more productive and the Singapore attract more foreigner investment and the strength in economic. Talk about the income redistribution, right? It's referred the government reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. In Singapore, it is achieved through the progressive taxation, subsidies, and the support programs such as the affordable housing and the healthcare. Its effect and its impact, the lower income group receive a greater support and improve a standard of living. When we talk about the economic stabilization, right, it means the government aim to keep the economic stable by controlling taxation, unemployment, and economic growth. In Singapore, the policy are used to prevent extreme economic functions. It's out to maintain steady growth, the stable prices, and job opportunity. The results consume and businesses can make a decision with a greatest confidence, leading a sustainable economic development. I think I fully covered this part, so without wasting time, we're moving into the following section. Well, in this slide, I attached the circular flow diagram. This diagram shows in Singapore how the money, goods, and service move continuously between the household, firm, and the government. Talk about the households, provide the labor of the firm and receive wages as income. They then spend income on goods and the service produced by the firm, which creates revenue for the business. At the same time, the government collects taxes from the both households and firms. This acts as a leakage from the economy. However, the government also spent money on the public service, subsidies, and the which influence the money back into the economics. This also produce and process the highlights of the important role of the government in managing economic actively. It's help ensure effectively resources allocate, reduce the income, and the maintain economic stability through the fossil policies. I think I fully covered this slide and the diagram explanation. Without wasting time, we moving into the following slide. I will pass to my group member for the continuous. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, I will present about fiscal and monetary policy in Singapore. By the way, my name is NURQAMARINA. So, from your right side, you can see that fiscal policy mostly is controlled by government, but while monetary policy is controlled by central bank. So, in Singapore, economic policy framework combines a unique exchange rate based monetary policy with a prudent structural surplus focused fiscal policy. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, or we call in short form MAS, manage the Singapore dollar nominal effective exchange rate in single dollar to maintain price stability, while the Ministry of Finance (MOF) uses fiscal policy to foster long-term growth and competitiveness. So the second slide, I will explain about the fiscal policy vs a monetary policy. Okay, from this slide, we can see the expansionary fiscal policy and impact in Singapore. So from here, we have the employment protections, targeted support measures, infrastructure and long-term growth, and inflationary pressure. So in Singapore, in economy recovery and growth, substantial fiscal injections during year of 2020 to 2021 was pivotal in minimizing economic scarring and fostering a rapid rebound in real GDP. So in employment protection, you can see that there is a job support scheme JSS, which is policies like the JSS Act as a wage subsidy and protecting jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. Targeted support for vulnerable groups. You may see that focus assistance for vulnerable groups and support for households facing rising costs of living. They are rather than purely broad-based measure. Recent policies focus on targeted support for businesses and households, which is for the rising cost of living. So in infrastructures and long-term growth, the government uses fiscal space to invest in infrastructure, example like through SINGA, and upscaling initiative like Skills Futures. So in Skills Futures, they have their bond, or they will sponsor by the Skills Future, which is, if let's say your age is 40s, so they will giving about 4,000 to for you to upgrade any course that you'll be taking up. So in the inflationary pressures, while stimulating demands, increased spending alongside global supply issues can raise inflations, so requiring a delicate balance with monetary policy. Okay, this slide is showing contractionary fiscal policy and impact in Singapore. So you may see that the cooling inflations and budget surplus is tightening measures such as raising the GST from 7% to 9% in year 2023 to 2024 are designed to manage rising costs resulting in a fiscal surplus of 0.8% of GDP for year 2023. And for the reduced disposable income, higher taxes, income tax, especially GST, reduce household disposable income and consumptions, shifting aggregate demand to the left side, which moderates inflationary pressure. While reduced government expenditure is lowering government spending, especially after periods of high pandemic-related spending aids in countering inflationary pressure. While impact on growth mean to control inflections. Contractionary measure risk slowing down GDP growth, particularly if implemented when the economy is already facing external shock. On the long-term strategy, the government often balances this with targeted supports, avoiding excessive contraction that could cripple growth, focusing on long-term sustainability. On the contextual factors, role of monetary policy, Singapore often relies heavily on its monetary policy managed by the MAS using the exchange rate as its primary tool for curbing inflation, according to the of the impact of the Singapore. So under space, basically Singapore's strong financial reserve enable the government to switch between contractionary for stability and especially for support stances. So you may see this the graph, which is you can see the output and increase in net taxes. So you may see that in governments increases taxes 7% to 9% is reducing spending, while impact on economy, disposable income will be reduced, consumption will be reduced, and investment may be reduced also. So under aggregate demand, which is the shifted to the left, you may see the price level decrease in inflation control. Output GDP also will be decreased and possible unemployment will be increasingly in Singapore. So this is about the contextually fiscal policy impact in Singapore. Okay, finally we go to the monetary policy, how it was example and impact in Singapore. So in Singapore, central banks has a unique method of managing monetary policy, tweaking the exchange rate of its currency instead of changing domestic interest rate like many economics. So under the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, sets the part of what it calls the policy band of Singapore dollar nominal effective exchange rate, Singapore dollar, thus strengthening or weakening the local currency against those of its main trading partners. So basically, monetary policy is the management of a country's money supply and interest rate to influence economic growth and inflation. Unlike most central banks that use interest rate, the MAS uses the Singapore dollar nominal effective exchange rate to ensure long-term price stability and manage inflation. So you can see how monetary policy works from the graph. You may see there is a lending rate on housing goes down, purchase of house are encouraged, more homes are built, economic activity rises, consumption increases, saving are discouraged, deposit rates go down. So it's in between of the reduced interest rate OPR. So basically, central banks such as the Federal Reserve control monetary policy. They use various tools to maintain economic stability and ensure inflation stays low around 2% like that. Tools include adjusting interest rate, changing the amount of money in circulation and buying or selling bonds. For instance, if there is a high inflation, they may raise interest rate discouraging people from borrowing and encouraging them to save, to make save or like gold bar saving or investment money saving. So if there is too little inflections, they may lower interest rate, encouraging people to borrow and spend. By lowering rates, they make it cheaper for business to borrow money and invest. As the demand for goods up, so does inflations. The central bank reduces inflations by raising rates by making it more expensive for consumer to buy things because prices increase when borrowing costs rise. You may see from the charts, right? So the Federal Reserve Board in Singapore sets interest rate by voting at its regular meetings. So for once appointed and confirmed by the Congress, everything, this is the mandate that set out by the Singapore government. So lastly, about how does the Singapore dollar exchange rate affect inflation, you can see from the graph. There is a direct impact, which is the immediate effect via cheaper imports, while indirect impact is lower effect via reduced demand and economic activity. You may see there is the Singapore dollar appreciate against the currencies of our major trading partner. Then price of important go to the cost reduction are eventually passed through to the price that are paid by consumer. This is the charge that rolling all over the monetary policy. So actually, monetary policy takes time to work through the economy and affect consumer prices. This is because price setting by businesses involve many other considerations beside the exchange rate. These include demand conditions, competitive pressure, length of business contract, as well as other input costs. So, for instance, when Mars tightens monetary policy, the Singapore dollar strengthens. This will lower import costs for business in Singapore dollar terms. However, they may not make immediate changes to the prices they charge to consumers. This could be because of business costs such as electricity, warehouse and transportation services, or rental may be fixed um, under an existing contract. Businesses might only be able to adjust their price after their contracts expire, and they can renegotiate new contract with revised prices. Companies may also need to consider how wage costs are changing. Therefore, it may take times, sometimes before the lower import costs due to the stronger Singapore dollar are passed on to consumer. So businesses will also take time to assess how demand for their goods and services might change in uh, response to mass monetary policy tightening. A stronger Singapore dollar makes our exports more expensive for foreign buyer. For instance, tourists may not visit Singapore if our dollar is much stronger than their home currencies, and cost of hotels and attractions price in Singapore dollar become too expensive and very expensive. Such changes in demand will eventually cause businesses to cut back on production, hiring, and investment. Over time, business costs in the Singapore economy should fall, causing business to adjust their prices. In other words, the effects of monetary policy moved by mass take time to gradually flow through the economy. Meanwhile, economic conditions in our trading partners and in Singapore are always changing. Always is right, up and down. This means mass needs to pay close attention to the factors driving growth and inflation in both the near and medium term when deciding on the setting for monetary policy. So thank you from me. Hope you all understand about the fiscal and monetary policy in Singapore's term.
Thank you, Arina. We have covered the Singapore's economic function and its fiscal and monetary policies. So now let's look at the limitations of government policies in Singapore. One key limitation is Singapore's high dependence on external economies. As a highly open and trade-dependent country, global events such as inflation and supply chain disruptions can reduce the effectiveness of government policies. Next is Singapore's monetary policy, mainly focuses on the exchange rate rather than the interest rates. This limits the government's ability to directly control domestic borrowing and spending. Another limitation is the time lag in fiscal policy. Government spending and taxation policies take time to be implemented and to show results, which makes it more difficult to respond quickly to sudden economic changes. Okay, so now moving on, referring to the inflation graph here, we can see that the inflation has increased significantly in recent years. This highlights another limitation, which is imported inflation. Because Singapore relies heavily on imports, rising global prices directly increase domestic inflation, making it harder for the government to fully control price levels. In addition, despite income redistribution policies, inequalities still exist, especially due to the high cost of living in Singapore. Lastly, there is the crowding out effect, where increased government spending may reduce private sector investment. Okay, now moving on to the implications for the economy. Despite these limitations, Singapore's policies contribute to strong economic stability, with relatively low unemployment and controlled inflation over time. However, the economy remains highly vulnerable to global shocks, meaning that the external events can quickly affect growth and prices. Now, if we refer to the exchange rate versus inflation graph here in this slide, we can see an important relationship. When the Singapore dollar strengthens, inflation decreases because imports become cheaper. However, this also creates a trade-off. A stronger currency makes exports more expensive, reducing demand for Singapore's goods and services. Now, this may also slow down the economic growth and affect businesses, especially those that rely heavily on exports. Okay, now, so if we look at the positive side, Singapore's long-term strategies such as investment in infrastructure, education, and skills and development, it will support sustainable economic growth. However, income inequality remains a challenge and policies need to be continuously adjusted to ensure an inclusive growth. Finally, Singapore's stable and well-managed policies help maintain high investor confidence. So this investor confidence will attract foreign investment and support business expansion in Singapore. Okay, so now we have come to the conclusion. In conclusion, Singapore demonstrates a strong and active role of government in managing its economy. The government performs key functions such as resource allocation, income redistribution, and economic stabilization. Furthermore, Singapore also uses a unique policy mix, including exchange rate-based monetary policy and targeted fiscal policy. While these policies are effective, they also have some limitations, especially due to Singapore's dependence on the global economy and the imported inflation. So overall, Singapore has achieved strong economic growth, price stability, and global competitiveness. However, continuous improvements are necessary so that to address external risk and the income inequality problem. Alright, so that is the end of our presentation. We hope you found it informative and insightful. Thank you so much for your time and attention.